Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the future tense and try to figure out how we can use it in the passive voice in Latin. So this is the third video we've made on passive voice, so this might look a little familiar, but the first thing that you have to do is make sure you understand what we mean by voice. So there's two voices in Latin, right, when we're dealing with verbs. You have active and passive voice. So the difference is whether your subject is doing something or something's happening to it. So in these two sentences, right, you have I'm walking the dog and the dog is being walked by me. The first one, I'm walking the dog, is active voice, right? I, the subject, am doing something. The second one is passive voice, right? Because the dog is not doing anything, something's happening to it. And like I've been mentioning before, doesn't this mean the same thing? You might be asking yourself that. And yes, technically the meaning is the same, right? Or you're trying to express a similar meaning, but there is a slight difference in it. And the way you want to think about it is how you're emphasizing the subject in your sentence, right? So if you really want to emphasize that you are the one walking the dog, you would say, I walked the dog today, right? You're really saying, I'm the one who did it. Maybe you're having an argument with your family members and they're like, who walked the dog? I did, right? You really want to emphasize that. But if it doesn't matter who walked the dog, you're just trying to express that someone did it, you might say the dog was walked today, right? And it doesn't matter who walked the dog. You're just trying to get at the idea that someone did. The dog was walked, right? That's an example of when you might want to use passive voice. It really depends on how you're trying to express the action and whether or not you're trying to de-emphasize who was doing it. So this first slide, again, shows you the difference between active and passive. The active voice, the subject's doing something. So again, I'm walking the dog. I is the subject. Walking is the verb. Dog is your direct object. I am the one doing the walking. We call that active voice. On the other side, you have passive voice when the subject is receiving the action, right? Something's happening to the subject. They're not doing anything. This is if you were to say the dog is being walked by me. In that sentence, the dog is not actually doing anything. Something's happening to it. It's being walked. That's the difference between active and passive voice. So hopefully that makes some sense and you're feeling pretty good about it. But the real question we're after is how do we form it in Latin? How do we use and form passive voice? And like I've been telling you, it depends on the tense that you're using. Now, in this video, we're going to look at future tense, okay? And the good news is, just like with present and imperfect, which we've looked at so far, the future tense in the passive voice is formed the same way as an active voice. So in other words, the process is very, very similar, right? There's a couple minor little tweaks here and there in terms of spelling, but otherwise it's the same process. The only difference is you're changing the endings. So again, the passive endings we use are R, R-I-S-T-U-R, M-U-R, M-I-N-I, and N-T-U-R. And they represent I, you, he, she, it, we, you, all, and they, right? The catch, though, is that in future tense, there's two different processes, right, that you have to use. So there is a catch, which might drive you a little nuts. But if you're used to using future tense in the active voice, this should feel really familiar. And the trick with future tense is that conjugation matters. If you're using a first or second conjugation verb, meaning your infinitive ends in an ARE or a long ERE, you're using what we call the baby talk endings, bo, bb, bb, boo, right? In passive voice, the one little tweak is the second person singular is a BE, and you have passive endings, so it would be more bimini buntor. Now, if you have a third or fourth conjugation verb, meaning the infinitive ends in a short ERE for third or an IRE for fourth, you're not using bo, be, be, boo, right? Think back to active voice. This is where you use the A and 5 E's. So your endings in passive voice are going to be R, eris, ator, amor, amini, entor. Okay, so the process, again, is the exact same. So this is nothing unique to passive voice. The only difference is the endings, okay? And in this slide, I'm going to show you what they look like. If you were comparing them, active voice, future tense, you'd use bo, be, be, boo, or the A and 5 E's. You can see it on the left. So bo or means I, bis or ace means you, bit or et means he, she, or it, and down the line. In passive voice, it's the same kind of starting point, bo, be, be, boo, but we have different endings. So it's bor and r, beris and eris, bitor and ator, and that's how you can tell the difference between active and passive voice. So sometimes it's good just to see them next to each other so you can process what they look like. And this way, when you run into one in a translation or a story, you'll be able to recognize it pretty quickly. Okay, but again, the key idea here is we're only changing the endings. We're not changing the process itself for conjugation. So how do we do it? Well, like I just said, for future tense, first and second conjugation, you would go to the infinitive, you drop the RE to get your present stem, you add the bo, be, be, boo, right, the infix, and then you add your passive voice endings. For third and fourth conjugation, you go to the infinitive, you drop the RE, right, the present stem, same starting point, but you have to make sure that that final vowel is either an A or an E. okay? Then you add your passive voice ending. So that's where you have the sort of AE infix. And one thing you want to note, you might have already caught this, right, or been thinking about it. When you have third IO or fourth conjugation verbs, there's going to be an I in front of your future tense infix when you're dealing, again, with third IO and fourth. So in other words, there'll be an I in front of the A or the E. Okay, and that should feel pretty familiar. Same thing as active voice. So let's just look at a few examples so you can see this in action. If I gave you ambulo, ambulare, which means to walk, it's a first conjugation verb. You can tell by the ARE in the infinitive, ambulare. You go to ambulare, you drop the RE. That's my stem of ambula, right? You can see it in white with all these examples. You add the bo, be, be, boo. That's the part in blue. That's the future tense infix. And then you add your endings of R, RISTUR, MUR, MINI, NTUR. That's what makes it passive voice. So you'd have ambulabor, ambulaberis, ambulabitor, ambulabamor, bimi, buntor, right? And it means I will be walked, you will be walked, he, she, it will be walked. Okay, pretty straightforward. For second conjugation, an example would be moe o moere, to move. The long ERE in moere, the infinitive, makes its second conjugation. You go to the second part, right, the infinitive, drop the RE. My stem is moe, M-O-V-E. That's the part in white. I add on bo, be, boo, and I add my passive voice endings, right? So moe bor means I will be moved. Moe beris, you will be moved, and down the line, okay? So it's pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy there. A third conjugation verb would look like this, mito mitere, which means to send. I go to mitere, I drop the RE, my stem is M-I-T-T-E, but this is where you need to switch the vowel around. The E will stay for 5 of the 6, right? Second person, third person singular, and then all the plurals. But for that first person singular, you make it an A. This is why we say the A in 5 E's, okay? So you have mitar, right? That's I will be sent. Miteris, you will be sent. Mitator, and down the line, right? I just took my stem. I had to tweak the vowel for the future infix, right? The A in 5 E's. Then I added my passive voice ending, and that's what makes it passive, the R, R-I-S-T-U-R, and down the line, okay? The last two are where we have to think a little bit about vowels. So for third IO, yakio, yakare is a third IO verb. Again, you can tell because the infinitive is a short ERE, and the first principal part ends in an IO, right? You go to the infinitive, yakare, you drop the RE. My stem would look like IACE. But you have to take the E and make it an A for first person singular, right? The A in 5 E's. And because it's third IO, you have to stick an I in front of it. That's why you don't have yakar, you have yakiar. There's an IA there, and I've highlighted in blue for you to kind of see the future tense. Yakiar, I will be thrown. Yakieris, you will be thrown. Yakietor, he, she, it will be thrown, and down the line. A similar thing is happening with fourth conjugation, right? Audio, audire. When I drop the RE off audire, I have audi, that's my stem. I have to add the A in 5 E's to that stem. So in other words, my stem ends in an I. It's going to stay there. The I stays, and I'm adding the A in 5 E's. But either way, it looks just like third IO. Before my passive voice ending, I need an I followed by either an A or an E. That's what makes it future tense. So you'd have audiar, I will be heard, audieris, audiator, audiamor, and down the line, right? You will be heard, he, she, it will be heard. So it's not anything too complicated. I mean, you just got to get used to it. And hopefully you've done enough active voice with future tense that this feels pretty good. But you're not changing the process. Again, the conjugation process for future tense is the same as active voice. All I really did was change the endings, and that's the difference between I will hear and I will be heard. Okay, so hopefully this is making some sense and you're feeling pretty good about it and you're not overloaded. If you need to practice it, go back, look at what I just did, practice it yourself, and try to do as many as you can until you feel good that you're able to accomplish this. Okay, and you want to remember with passive voice, you're usually looking for ablatives. Ablative of agent if it's a person, ablative of means if it's a thing. I've said that on all the videos, but it's something you want to look for. No matter what tense your passive voice verb is, you're usually looking for ablative case. Okay, so let's do some examples and just kind of see it in action and what it'll look like in context of a Latin sentence. Okay, so here's one sentence for you. You have multa verba de gloria patriae dicentur et audientur. Okay, so you're saying many words about the glory of the fatherland, of the country, gloria patriae, will be said, dicentur, and will be heard, audientur. Okay, so you can see by the way these are spelled, you have dico, dicere, third conjugation. That's why the E in entor, the E is giving it away as being future tense, right? The A in 5 E's. Audio audire is a fourth conjugation verb. So you have IE followed by entor. That's what's making it future tense. Okay, but either way, you can tell by what's in front of the entor that it's future tense. Next, you have Cornelius, a multis audietur et laudabitur. Okay, so you're saying Cornelius will be heard and praised by many. Okay, so audietur, he will be heard. Audire, fourth conjugation verb, so that IE in front of the TUR is telling you it's future tense. Laudare is a first conjugation verb, so we have bo, be, boo, right? So the BI in front of the TUR is giving it away as being future tense. And the reason we know it's passive is the TUR. That's a distinctly passive ending. So you're saying he will be heard and he will be praised. Right? Next, you have e tabernis, multa dona ad vilam aservis portabuntur. So many gifts will be carried, portabuntur. Again, portare is a first conjugation verb. The BU is giving it away as being future tense. They will be carried, right? And the NTUR is giving you passive voice. They'll be carried out of the shops to the house, ad vilam, by slaves. There's your ablative. I didn't point it out in the other two, but you can see that the ablative is there as well. A servis is your ablative of agent. Because slaves are people, you have the preposition a, right? And it's just got an ablative ending on it by the slaves. It's telling you who's doing the carrying. And the last one we have is in foro, non erit otium quod multum negotium agetur. So there will not be leisure, otium, in the forum, because there's a lot of business, multum negotium, much business, will be done, agetur. This is ago agere, it's a third conjugation verb. The E in front of the TUR is telling you it's future tense, right? If it had been present tense, this would have been an I. So the E is telling you future tense. The TUR is telling you that it's passive, so you translate it as not someone will do something, but it will be done. Okay, so hopefully that's starting to make a little bit of sense, and you can see how you're going to pick this up by looking at sentences in Latin, which is the best way to learn it. But a pro tip, again, I always say this, the best way to handle like verbs and conjugation voice is with Magistrula. And again, I don't own Magistrula. I don't have anything to do with it. I'm just a really big fan. And I think it's the easiest way to really practice this, because you can hop on Magistrula, you can go to the charts section, and you can get or you can conjugate as many verbs as you want in the future tense, active and passive voice, right? And you can just do them over and over and over again until you feel really confident in how they work. This would be a really good starting point, learning how to conjugate them. And then you can also use the sentences button, or section rather, where you can set it up to give you sentences that are specifically using future tense passive voice. And that gives you really the best practice, where you're seeing it in the context of actual Latin, and you're practicing your translation skills. So a combination of those on Magistrula is the best way to learn this. And then you'll be ready to read whatever textbook you're using or whatever Latin you're choosing to read. You'll be prepared to read that and just get as much practice as you can, right? The more you do, the better off you're always going to be. So let's recap this video. So future tense passive voice. Again, the passive voice is when the subject is receiving the action, not doing anything. You're translating future passive as will be blank, right? Whatever the past tense form of your verb is. So will be seen, will be heard, will be thrown, whatever it is. It's formed the same way as active voice, but you're using passive endings. So for first and second conjugation, you're using the bo, be, boo, right? Just pay attention to the be in second person singular. And for third and fourth conjugation, you're using the a and the e. If you happen to run into a third I or a fourth conjugation verb, you have to make sure that there's an I in front of your a or your e. Right? Simple as that. So again, if you're really confident with active voice, passive voice really shouldn't be too bad to figure out. You're doing basically the same thing. So again, practice this as much as you can. Use Magistrula, use whatever textbook you might be doing. The more you practice, the more comfortable you're going to be. There's just no way around it. You've got to dive in. You've got to practice your conjugation, and you really need to read. The more you can read these in Latin and see them in context, the more you're going to be able to identify them. You're going to feel really comfortable with it, and you'll get used to it very quickly, where it's not even a major issue, right? Active, passive, it won't make a difference to you. So if you have any questions at all on what I put in this video, feel free to put a comment below. I'll help you however I can. But otherwise, the more you do, the more comfortable you're going to feel, and you should just practice and read as much as you can. Good luck.